My name is Michael. I'm a software engineer, one of those quiet, dependable types who doesn't make waves. 42 years old, married for 12 of them, father to 2 kids who mean the world to me. I wasn't flashy. I didn't do grand romantic gestures or surprise vacations. What I did do was show up. Every single day. I cooked dinner 3 nights a week, kept the house running when my wife had late meetings, and handled every birthday party, dentist appointment, and scraped knee like it was part of my job description. Because it was. Being a husband and a father wasn't a role to me, it was my identity. Or at least, I thought it was. It happened on a Tuesday. Not a special Tuesday. Not one with red flags waving or tension in the air. Just an ordinary Tuesday morning where I got up, made coffee, and handed my wife her phone as she searched for it under couch cushions. I noticed it then. Her phone lit up as I handed it over, and there it was, silly idiot, with my number underneath. At first, I laughed. A short, hollow laugh, the kind that tries to hide something but fails. Silly idiot, huh? I said, trying to sound amused. She barely looked up. Oh, that? It's just a joke, she said, brushing it off with a wave of her hand. You're so dramatic. Dramatic. That word stuck in my ribs like a shard of glass. I tried to let it go. Really, I did. I poured my coffee and kissed her goodbye before heading to work, but my chest felt tight, like I was wearing a shirt 2 sizes too small. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'd never saved her under anything but Jenna in my contacts, never once crossed the line into mocking. But me? I was the silly idiot. Just a joke. At work, I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe she really did mean it playfully. Maybe I was overreacting. I told myself she'd always had a sarcastic sense of humor. I thought about all the times we'd ribbed each other in the past. But something about this felt different. Cruel, even. Because it wasn't just a nickname, it was how she saw me. The name you assign to someone in your phone, that's private. That's for you. No filters. And when she thought no one was looking, that's who I was to her. A joke. I remembered the smirks, the eye rolls at dinner parties, the way she corrected me in front of her friends like I was a child who needed managing. I thought of all the times she had dismissed my opinions with a laugh or told me to leave the adult stuff to her when it came to finances. Those weren't jokes. Not really. They were little daggers, and I'd spent years bleeding without realizing it. That night, she curled up on the couch next to me like nothing was wrong, scrolling on her phone, giggling at some meme. I watched her for a long moment, trying to find the woman I married in her face. Jenna used to look at me like I was the only person in the room. Now, she barely looked at me at all. Do you even respect me? I asked suddenly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She turned, puzzled. What? Of course I do. What's with you tonight? Why would you save me as that in your phone? She rolled her eyes. Michael, seriously? It's just a silly name. God, you're being so sensitive. I nodded slowly, jaw tight. She didn't get it. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't care. And in that moment, I knew something had shifted. Not just between us, but inside me. A wire had snapped. I had spent so long making peace in a house that didn't respect me. So long believing that love meant swallowing my pride in silence. But I wasn't going to live up to that name anymore. I went to bed early that night, leaving her on the couch. I stared at the ceiling for hours, thinking about the life I had built and the one I was still young enough to reclaim. In the quiet of our bedroom, with only the hum of the ceiling fan to keep me company, I reached for my phone and typed a short message to my lawyer. Let's move forward. I'm ready. The next few days passed like slow, bitter syrup. I went through the motions. Woke the kids up for school, packed their lunches, answered work emails, fixed a leaky faucet Jenna kept forgetting to call someone about. But under it all was a quiet, growing storm. I didn't mention the contact name again. Not once. I didn't bring it up at dinner or in bed or in those rare moments of soft quiet we still had. I just watched, observed. And what I saw made it clear that this wasn't about one stupid name in a phone. That was just the crack in the wall. The damage went deeper. She didn't notice I'd stopped reaching for her hand while we watched TV. Didn't seem to mind when I no longer stayed up late just to talk. She didn't ask why I didn't touch her lower back when passing behind her in the kitchen, something I'd done for over a decade. I had pulled back, and she hadn't noticed. Or worse, she noticed and didn't care. I'd always believed that marriages crumbled with shouting matches, slamming doors, betrayal spelled out in neon. But now I knew better. Sometimes, marriages died quietly in the small absences, in the failure to notice when someone is slipping away. The irony was that I'd never cheated, never lied, never yelled. I was the good guy. That's how everyone saw me. Jenna included. She said it often, usually with that same edge of sarcasm. Oh, Michael? He's harmless. He's the good guy. But harmless started to feel like spineless. And good guy started to sound a lot like doormat. I remembered how she spoke to her friends about me when she thought I couldn't hear. Michael's sweet, but he's not exactly assertive. One night, I overheard her say to her sister, "Sometimes I wish he'd just tell me to shut up and take control for once." I hadn't confronted her then. I chalked it up to frustration, told myself it was a bad day, but those words clung to me like wet fabric. So when my lawyer emailed me back, "Let's schedule a meeting for this Friday," I replied with no hesitation. I made sure every detail would be covered: financials, custody, the house. I knew Jenna wouldn't expect it. That was the whole point. She thought I'd always take it, always shrug, always forgive. Thursday night, she asked what I wanted for dinner, voice light, casual. "I can make the pasta you like, unless you're still mad about the phone thing," she said with a smirk, like it was all still a punchline. I just looked at her. "You really don't get it, do you?" She frowned, puzzled, but still dismissive. "It's not that deep, Michael." I didn't respond. I simply walked upstairs and shut the door behind me. That night, I sat alone in the study, looking around at the life I'd built. The framed photos on the wall. Our wedding day. The kids' first steps. Family vacations where I carried all the bags while she snapped pictures. I stared at a photo of the four of us at the beach, her smile wide and bright, mine just a little forced. Had I always looked like that? Had I always been hiding my exhaustion behind tight-lipped smiles? The next morning was quiet. I took the kids to school, then drove straight to my lawyer's office. We spent hours reviewing documents. I signed everything. The papers would be delivered the following day. When I got home, Jenna was on the porch, sipping coffee, wrapped in a cardigan, scrolling her phone again. She looked up and gave me a brief smile. "How was work?" she asked. I stared at her for a moment, then gave the most honest answer I'd given in years. "I didn't go to work. I went to see my lawyer." Her smile faltered. "Wait, what?" I walked past her, opened the front door, and turned just enough to meet her eyes. "You'll get the paperwork tomorrow." She blinked, stunned. "What paperwork?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. The call came at 9:13 a.m. on a Friday. She was still in her robe, sipping tea on the couch with one leg tucked beneath her. The kids were already at school, and I was upstairs, pacing my office like I was waiting for a storm to hit. And when her phone rang, the storm finally arrived. I heard the muffled ringtone, then her voice, sharp, confused, rising. "Who is this?" she asked, and then after a pause, "Wait." "Wait what?" She shot up from the couch, eyes darting to the stairwell. "There must be a mistake," she stammered. "I haven't." We're not." I came down slowly. There was no need to rush. The moment had been coming for a long time, and I was going to meet it with both feet planted firmly on the ground. She looked up at me as I stepped into the living room. Her face had gone pale. The hand holding the phone trembled slightly, but she didn't even notice. "Michael," she said, voice a mixture of disbelief and accusation. "What the hell is this?" I didn't flinch. "It's exactly what it sounds like." "You filed for divorce?" Her voice cracked at the word, like she'd just been slapped. I nodded once. Calm. Detached. The way she always said I was during arguments. "I told you yesterday you'd get the paperwork. This is me following through." She stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was. "But why? Over a nickname? You're seriously blowing up our family over that." I laughed once, low and humorless. "This isn't about a nickname. It's about years of disrespect wrapped in sarcasm. It's about being diminished one joke at a time until I didn't even recognize myself anymore." "Oh, come on," she said, voice rising. "You're taking everything so personally. I joke with everyone. You used to laugh with me." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I used to laugh for you. There's a difference." That silenced her. She blinked hard, like the weight of that sentence landed somewhere she hadn't braced for. You can't just. Michael, we have kids, she said, desperation starting to break through the defiance. You can't just pull the rug out from under all of us. I nodded again, slowly, which is why I made sure to keep the rug under them. I've got the house. The lawyer's already filed for full custody. I've been the primary parent for years, Jenna. That's not a stretch and you know it. The color drained from her face. You're taking my children away from me? I'm giving them stability. Something I stopped having with you. She reached for me then, maybe to touch my arm or my hand, but I stepped back. Her fingers hovered in the air between us before falling limply to her side. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said quietly. I thought we had a rhythm, that we understood each other. I gave a tired smile. You had a rhythm. I had a routine. There's a difference. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then she whispered, so that's it? You're just done? I was done the minute you laughed at my pain, I said. You didn't apologize. You dismissed it. That's the moment I stopped being your husband and started being your exit plan. Her eyes welled up, but I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction. Just a dull, aching clarity. I'm sorry, she said finally. I didn't realize you were so unhappy. And maybe that was the worst part of it all, how genuinely surprised she seemed. Like my unhappiness had been invisible, or worse, insignificant. I'm not going to be your silly idiot anymore, Jenna, I said, and walked away. The days that followed were a strange blend of chaos and quiet. On the surface, everything kept moving, meals had to be made, homework supervised, laundry sorted, but beneath it all was a sense of unraveling. Jenna stayed in the house for another week while we waited for the court's temporary orders. We coexisted like two ghosts who used to love each other, floating past one another in silence, burdened by everything we weren't saying. The kids knew something was wrong. My son, Liam, only 9, asked me softly one night, "Are you and Mommy mad at each other?" I pulled him close, kissed the top of his head, and said, "We're trying to figure some things out, buddy. But we both love you very much." That hasn't changed. Jenna didn't argue in front of the kids. I'll give her that. But behind closed doors, the breakdown was full of sharp whispers and desperate glances. I can't believe you're really going through with this, she hissed one night in our bedroom as I packed a drawer of clothes for her to take to her sisters. After everything we've built? After everything we've been through? We didn't build it together, I said without looking up. I was the foundation. You just decorated the walls. You're being cruel, she snapped. No, I said quietly, folding another shirt. Cruel would have been staying and letting my kids grow up thinking this was what a marriage should look like. Her eyes narrowed. So now you're the martyr? No, I'm just finally being honest. I saw the pain in her face, but I didn't flinch. I had flinched too many times before, second-guessed myself, softened my words, twisted logic to make her feel better. But not this time. When the court granted me temporary primary custody and set a date for formal hearings, Jenna packed a single suitcase. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't offer help. She left that Saturday afternoon. No dramatic exit. No final argument. Just a quiet closing of the front door and a car pulling out of the driveway. I stood in the living room after she was gone, the echo of her absence louder than any fight we'd ever had. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was raw, jagged. Like the quiet after a house collapses. I kept myself busy, as I always had. I cleaned, cooked, organized, filled the time with motion so I wouldn't have to think. But at night, once the kids were asleep and the house settled into stillness, the grief would come. Not for her, but for the years I'd spent trying so hard to make something work that was fundamentally broken. There was a kind of guilt that hovered. Not because I regretted leaving, but because I questioned why it had taken me so long. Why I had accepted so little. Why I taught my children, however unintentionally, that love meant endurance over respect. One evening, I sat on the back porch watching the sun dip below the trees, drink in hand, and thought about the early days of our marriage. We weren't always this fractured. There were real moments of connection once. I remembered her laugh, how it used to sound before it turned sharp. I remembered how she used to hold my hand when we crossed the street, even when no cars were coming. I missed that version of her. But I didn't miss this cold, biting version who belittled and dismissed, who chipped away at me one casual insult at a time. The next morning, she called. Her voice was soft. Can I come by and see the kids? You can, I said, but only if you leave the manipulation at the door. She was silent for a moment. I miss you, she said. I let the silence hang between us like fog. I miss who you used to be, she added. I think you mean, you miss who I used to let you be, I said, and hung up. She showed up 3 days later, unannounced. It was early evening. I just finished making dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, something simple the kids loved. We were sitting around the table, the soft clinking of spoons and the murmur of their voices filling the room. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jenna standing on the porch, arms crossed over her chest, hair in a messy bun, makeup smudged just enough to betray the emotional wear beneath her polished exterior. There was no suitcase this time, just a battered leather purse and her pride, both barely hanging on. Can we talk? She asked, not quite meeting my eyes. The kids rushed toward the door. Mom, they shouted, voices high and joyful. I stepped aside and let them hug her, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. She knelt down and squeezed them back, her face hidden in their hair. When she looked up again, there were tears in her eyes. Can we go outside? She asked, her voice cracking. I nodded and followed her out to the porch, leaving the door slightly ajar so I could hear the kids. She stood there for a moment, hands shaking, then finally turned to face me. I don't have anywhere else to go, she said. There was no accusation in her voice, no anger. Just a raw vulnerability that would have wrecked me 6 months ago. But now? Now it only stirred a distant ache, like a scar you press on just to remind yourself it's healed. I went to my sister's, but she said I'd have to start paying rent if I wanted to stay longer. My mom doesn't have space. In my job, they cut back my hours. I said nothing, waiting. I'm not asking to move back in, she added quickly. I know that's not an option. I didn't realize how hard it would be. Out there. Alone. I finally spoke, my voice steady. Do you remember the night I told you I want to see a lawyer? The look on your face? That shock, that disbelief. She nodded slowly. That was the first time I realized how little you saw me. You didn't think I could do it. You didn't think I would. You thought I'd stay, like I always had. She lowered her eyes. I thought you loved me too much to leave. I did love you, I said. But love without respect is just a slow death. And I was dying in this house. Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't move to comfort her. That part of me was gone, burned out like a candle left too long in the wind. Michael, I've been thinking about everything, about how I treated you. I didn't know how small I was making you feel. You didn't want to know, I corrected. There's a difference. She nodded, lips trembling. I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to change. For the kids. For myself. I need help. I need some place to start over. The old me might have folded. Might have offered her the guest room, made excuses, tried to convince myself that boundaries were cruel when in truth, they were the kindest form of honesty. But I wasn't that man anymore. I'll help you get back on your feet, I said. A few nights in a motel. Groceries for the week. But that's it. The kids need stability. I need peace. And you need to learn what it means to live with the consequences of the things you laughed off. Her shoulders slumped, but she didn't argue. She nodded, slowly, like someone finally beginning to understand the weight of her own choices. I'll be better, she whispered. I looked at her, really looked, and felt a strange mix of sorrow and liberation. I hope you will. But whether you are or not, that's no longer my burden. She left with quiet dignity. No more begging, no more bargaining. And for the first time in years, I watched her walk away without wanting to follow. It took months for the dust to fully settle. Jenna found a small studio apartment near her workplace. I helped with the deposit, like I said I would, and she didn't ask for more. We transitioned into co-parenting with a cautious truce, scheduled visits, a shared calendar, polite exchanges at the door. The kids were resilient, as children often are, but even they could feel the shift in the air. The house was quieter now, but lighter, too. Laughter came more easily, dinners felt less tense, and bedtime stories ended with real smiles instead of forced routines. There were nights when I'd sit alone in the living room, the hum of the dishwasher in the background, and wonder how it had come to this. A few years ago, I'd imagined growing old with Jenna, family holidays, grandkids one day, a house full of memories. Now, I was rebuilding from scratch. Not just my life, but my identity. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt. Early mornings where I reached for a coffee mug and remembered the way she used to tease me for drinking it black, or evenings when the kids cried because they missed her. Those were the hardest. When they'd ask if mommy could come back, if things could go back to normal. I never lied. I told them the truth, wrapped gently in love. That families change, but love doesn't vanish. That respect matters. That no one deserves to feel small, not in a marriage, not in a home. Jenna tried, in her way. She started seeing a therapist. She apologized, again and again, in small ways, never expecting forgiveness, just offering accountability. That part surprised me. She didn't grovel, didn't guilt trip. She owned it. And maybe that was the first real gesture of love I'd seen from her in years. But it was too late for us. Some things don't heal. Some walls, once cracked, don't rebuild the same. I started going for runs in the early mornings, rediscovering parts of myself I hadn't touched in years. Picked up woodworking on the weekends. Volunteered at the kids' school. I stopped waiting for peace to find me and started creating it, piece by piece. One Sunday, I stood in the kitchen, watching Liam and Ella chase each other through the hallway, their giggles echoing through the house. The sun poured through the windows, soft and golden. I leaned against the counter, took a long breath, and felt something I hadn't in years. Stillness. Not the kind that comes from silence, but the kind that comes from certainty. I had made the right choice. Jenna and I would always be tied, through the kids, through the years we shared. But I would never again be the man who accepted mockery as affection, who mistook tolerance for love. That version of me had finally laid down his burdens. And as I stood there, arms crossed, coffee in hand, I whispered it to myself, not out of spite, but with a quiet pride. I'm done being an idiot. If this story moved you, hit that like button to show your support. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been in a situation where enough was finally enough? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe for more raw, real-life stories that dive deep into the drama behind closed doors. New stories every day. Thanks for listening. See you soon in the next one.